Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So we are right now. We just started the book of Exodus, and we've gotten up to a point where the enslavement has taken place, and we're in the midst of God's commissioning Moses to go and speak to Pharaoh and to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses is resisting, and he resists several times. And at this point, God decides for a plan. Let's call it Plan B. We'll see. Plan A would have been slightly different. It's not a major difference, Plan B, but it is a Plan B, and we'll see what that involves. So we're here where God is responding to Moses. Moses has just told him that he is heavy of mouth and heavy of tongue. In other words, he doesn't feel he is articulate enough to do the job. He can't do it. Vayomer Hashem, and the Lord said, Elav, to him, Mi sam pe la'adam, who has placed a mouth for man, or mi yasum ilaim, or who makes someone incapable of speaking, or cheresh, or deaf, or pikeach, or capable of hearing, or iver, or blind. Halo Anochi Hashem. Behold, it is I, the Lord. So this is actually something really, I think, to meditate on. I mean, this is a very powerful statement in terms of the degree to which God controls our lives. And I think that is something actually radically magnificent about Judaism in terms of our belief in one divine creator, because we see here God taking responsibility for negative things and not just for positive things. God isn't just a sugar daddy in the sky, but God is the controlling force behind all existence. And actually, if you examine the prayer Aleinu at the end of our services, you'll see basically a similar kind of concept. And when it says you are the first and you are the last, I think I understand it as meaning that God is the first cause of everything, and that ultimately, when the world comes to an end, God will still be there. So the point is that God is saying to Moses, you have no excuse. If I'm sending you, I'm the one who's going to make you capable of this. And that's another very profound idea in terms of believing in God. And that is understanding that we wouldn't be capable to think, we wouldn't be capable of thought, we wouldn't be capable of consciousness, that there is something, and the word, of course, we use is transcendent, right? Something that actually is beyond the level of existence that we have, that makes our level of existence possible. And that's encapsulated in so many ways in this sentence that we have just read. And at this point in my life, I have to say that I am so absolutely convinced that I would have no ability to think, to to speak, to do any of these things if it weren't capable of this divine creator, this transcendent level of existence. And frankly, I can't just assume that it just happens, but that there is this ultimate cause, if I want to call it that, and maybe the word cause is being used very loosely here. But there's a fundamental power underneath all of this that so that none of this stuff would be happening. So, and there are a lot of implications that come out of that. But let's take a look at what Rashi does, because Rashi is going to take the traditional interpretation and share it with us at this point. So let me find the place. Okay, so we're on verse 11, and let me see if verse 11 starts here. It does not. So we're going to go in here, and there's verse 11, right? Mi sampe, who placed a mouth? Now, Rashi, based on the rabbis, is going to go much more specific. So, mi limedcha, who taught you, ledaber, to speak, keshehayita nadon lifnei paro, when you were being judged before Pharaoh, al Mitzri, regarding the Egyptian. So, of course, we're familiar with the story regarding the Egyptian that Moses killed when he saw this Egyptian abusing and essentially in the process of killing an Israelite. And that the issue, of course, we know that Moses ran away and then eventually returned. And what Rashi's referring to here is that somehow we have to assume that Moses was able to defend himself. So that's how I'm understanding this, that God gave Moses the words to speak to Pharaoh in his own defense. Or mi yasum ilaim, or who makes someone incapable of speaking. And the reference here is the Tanhuma. This is the source where Rashi gets his next comment. Mi asa paro ilaim, who made Pharaoh incapable of speaking. Shelo nitametz b'mitzvat harigatcha, because he was not able to nitametz is to essentially be devoted to really make every effort, that he didn't make every effort in the commandment of killing you. Ve'et mishartav charashim, and who made his servants cheresh, deaf, shelo shamu tzivato alecha. So I think that's how I would try and punctuate this, right? They were not able to hear him when he commanded regarding you. So in other words, we're saying, if we were to take everything up to this point together, that God is saying, who protected you? Who made sure you're here even today? So I think that there's an implication there that Moses really shouldn't have been rejecting the idea of God sending him. So, ispaktorin, Pahorgim, right? And to the executioners who execute, Bi asam ivrim, who made them blind, Shelo ra'u keshebarachta min habima v'nimlatata, when you ran away from the execution stage and you were saved. So again, if we're able to, every one of these things would seem to exclude the next stage, but regardless, it's saying that, again, we look at this as literature, we realize that what we're doing is we're breaking down the various elements of Moses's having to escape from Pharaoh's clutches, and that how God made all of this possible. So in some ways it also, and this is what I love about what I feel is the literary analysis that this commentary suggests, right? That we're seeing a connection now between that story of the Egyptian being killed by Moses and Moses being able to escape to Midian and then be able to return. That he might never have made it had God not protected him. Halo Anochi, behold I, Sheshmi Hashem, that my name is Hashem, Asiti Kol Zot, I'm the one who made all this possible. And this is the idea that all the events that take place ultimately can be attributed to a divine cause.
When
Bert, you raised your hand.
Yes. I'm sorry, but put this in the context of the Holocaust for me. Because, just trust me and I'll fix everything. I'm like, how could the same God who's protecting Moses
Yes.
against all these little things not protect
Right.
6 million martyrs?
Of course, of course. And that's a question that has been raised. So it's not, obviously, I don't want to sort of give you a Job's comforter's kind of answer, but I think that part of the idea is that life here is very brief. And it is predicated on a belief that the nature of this life is for us to try and earn life in the next world, and that the significance, in fact, the only real significance that we have as human beings is, in fact, the degree to which we perform God's divine commandments, and in that way are able to bring the divine into this world. That's our responsibility, and that we can feel confident that there is something beyond the existence that we have in this world, and that frankly, there is nothing in this world that really, 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 that's of this world that brings joy or satisfaction. Please excuse me 1 second. Sorry, I have a cold. And to understand that death being the most democratic institution that exists in this world, because it affects you regardless of how much money you have or what your position of power is, it is going to something that you can see as inevitable. And I have to ask you to excuse me again.
No problem.
So, I again, I said I don't want to be a Job's comforter, and a Job's comforter is the idea that these people were telling Job, his comforters were telling him that in some sense he deserved what he got. That is not honestly something that I have a right to do in any sense whatsoever, okay? But I can look at my own life, and rather than see myself, well, to see the incredible privileges I have, and not only that, but that the parts of my life that might be described, as adversity, are honestly were there to teach me. That essentially adversity, I think, is an incredible teacher, and that the suffering, God willing, the suffering that all those uh, 6 million plus, because there were lots of other people who succumbed during that period of time, that somehow I would hope that their life right now is so blissful that it makes up, that only God is capable of making up whatever suffering they had, and to trust that God is capable of these things. It really comes under, I think, you know, those areas where I would have to say this is beyond my understanding. And not only that, there are many things that I'm not even aware of, that I don't even realize how ignorant I am of these. It's a legitimate question. You're asking a legitimate question, but it's also part of how we see where our faith takes us, and that our faith isn't limited, but this trying to develop within ourselves a sense of just how great the divine is, and also trusting that divine power. So I hope, at least while I would never claim that I've answered fully your question or even sufficiently your question, at least I hope it's helpful. And I
We can take this offline.
say that again.
We can deal, I don't expect you to
Okay.
deal with this entire question in the next whatever minutes we have.
Right, right.
So we can have a separate side discussion on this if you'd
Okay.
like.
Yeah. Okay. But I think this is all part of it too. All right. Understand that in some ways, um, what the Israelites went through in Egypt, right, is
Mhm.
is in some ways reflected in all the anti-Semitism that has taken place in all the years that have followed. We have two basic models. I think this is important enough, Bert, to deal with it. And I would hope that if anybody's listening to this, at some point, if somebody listens to this, that this is helpful and makes it worth listening to. There are basically two models that the Bible presents. One is the simple one, which is saying it's a punishment, right? That somehow it's being held accountable for the Israelites' transgressions. And honestly, I
You're
think
saying anti-Semitism is.
yes, that all the terrible things that have happened to the Jews, anti-Semitism,
Okay, all right.
that's the simple answer. But Isaiah, the latter part of the book of Isaiah, comes up with a very different answer, which takes away the blot of of guilt or stuff, and suggests that in some ways we are God's representatives, and the term suffering servant is the one used there. That in some ways it's indicative of the rebellion of humanity against their divine creator, which is an incredible, absolutely incredible example of a lack of appreciation. That when one, if anything, the discoveries of science should help us understand how great the creator is and how amazing creation is, and to attribute to this ultimate cause, which, if anything, and I think Maimonides actually brings this out too, should actually spark within us an incredible degree of appreciation for this world in which we live. And there are people who really reject that and hate that idea. I've The people who've been with me for a long time know that I feel that there's a very basic idea that people sort of carry, which is ain't no one going to tell me what to do. That in some ways that defines modernity. This idea that we don't have to answer to anyone or anything else, and that Judaism tries to help us overcome that particular level of egotism. So the idea that as representatives of the divine in some specific kind of way, that we are picked on for that reason, and that it's actually that we, it's like, you know, uh, kill the messenger, right? That in some ways we are a messenger of this idea of a divine creator, a transcendent divine creator, and which automatically means a level of accountability for our lives, and that there are people who resent that deeply. And I mean, there are other reasons as well for the anti-Semitism, because the truth is that Jews have contributed remarkably in many ways. Not to say that there aren't other people who've also contributed remarkably. I mean, you look at the Greeks, for example, but the truth is that Jewish civilization has also contributed remarkably to this world. So there's that idea that, you know, that the reason we have to face these things, at least according to Isaiah, is because people are in rebellion against God. So yeah, it's a deep kind of question. Anyway, let me go on with this a little bit. So here we go. We've taken care of verse 11, and we've got verse 12 has no Rashi for Ata. And now, so again, remember, God is speaking to Moses, Lech, go, for Anochi ehyeh ipicha, and I will be with your mouth. And I will show you that which you will say. So at this point, I also want to reflect on another sort of way in which the Bible or the Torah is put down. I've heard the argument, well, it's a creation of human beings. Human beings created the Torah too. And I have a few answers to that. Yes, Mozart was a human being. Shakespeare was a human being. Leonardo da Vinci was a human being. But the truth is, there are certain human beings who have incredible gifts that they were born with. I'm not saying that they didn't work to develop it, but even I would say the wisdom to develop those gifts is something that is ultimately divinely given. And so that even if it is human beings who are responsible for writing the words of the Torah, in no way does that negate the idea that they have a divine origin to them. And if we believe that God ultimately is the cause of everything that goes on in this world, there's no reason why we can't look at these words and see a level of brilliance and wisdom, just as we would with, people who are more secularly inclined, like Beethoven or Mozart or Shakespeare or some of the great scientists or mathematicians, etc., and to recognize that. So the fact that the Torah might have been written by human beings, to my mind, doesn't in any way, lessen the idea that there is a divine origin to the Torah. And
There you are, Harlan.
yeah. So that's my response to that, at least my attempt at a vigorous defense to that particular argument, which I think ultimately is specious. So,
Well,
uh,
yeah, I think the argument about whether the Torah is written by man or God, I think that's specious.
yes,
Um,
it is. It
well,
is.
but the other stuff I think I want to take offline because I don't want to knock you way off schedule.
That's
It'll
okay.
sound like your daughters, where we're still on Genesis chapter 3.
Yes,
So I'll let you keep on
I call
talking.
that going vertically. We're trying to move horizontally as well.
Yes.
So, okay. Yeah, no, there's no end to it. There really isn't. I mean, that's why they say that the Torah has like 70 ways of interpreting it. So, okay, we'll take one more verse. We'll see what we can do here. Vayomer. So again, despite what God's just said to him, and in some ways, this is again the beauty of the Torah, is that there's only one real hero in the Torah, and that is God. So here we have Moses again at the beginning of his mission, right? Vayomer bi Adonai, Adonai. He says, in a sense, he's saying, "Oh Lord," right? He's saying, "Please, please, Lord, shlachna, send, please send, biyat shlach, whoever you want to send." And this is, we'll see how Rashi takes a look at it, but it certainly on the pshat level looks like again that he is, he's resisting the idea of being sent. Now, I think there's actually more than one way in which we can look at this, all right? Because we know later on that Moses is described as perhaps the most humble of all human beings. And we can, I think, there's not just a sense of stubbornness here. I think there's also a sense, possibly, of that humility within Moses that's being represented here. But nevertheless, timing is everything, and at this particular point, this is not where he had to sort of say, please do it with somebody else. By the way, when Isaiah is commissioned by God to become a prophet, he immediately responds positively. Isaiah. Biyad tishlach, in the hands literally of whom you wish to send. Biyad, in the hands, in other words, under the authority or the power, mi she'ata ragil lishloach. In other words, so the way the rabbis are understanding this is that Moses is actually referring to a specific person, right? So he says he's understanding this. In other words, send the person who you are used to sending, but who Aaron, referring to Aaron. So we're understanding these words of Moses as a direct a request from God to send Aaron instead. And that sort of sets up what follows, which makes more sense. But there's another interpretation, davar acher, another interpretation, biyad acher, in other words, give the commission to a different person, shetirtzeh lishloach, that you wish to send. She'ein sofi, look at this, because in the end, sofi leyachnisam la'aretz, I will not in the end actually bring them into the land of Israel. Uliot ko'alam la'atid, and to be their savior in the future. Yesh lacha shluchim harbe, you have other uh, messengers, that you could send, representatives that will in fact do that. So it's interesting that Moses is given in this particular interpretation an ability to know that in the end he will not be the one to do it. And of course, that's a certain level of tragedy that the Torah leaves us with, in that despite the incredible, incredible job Moses does with the Jewish people, he doesn't actually succeed, and he fails to bring them into the land of Israel because of a mistake he makes. And again, I'm wondering if there's actually a deeper message involved in that, in saying that our mission here is brief. We do not necessarily accomplish everything that our mission involves, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't, despite whatever flaws we might have, to try and do the best we can. So let's I think we could do maybe one more. Vayichar af. At this point, God loses it, right? Literally, it means af Hashem b'Moshe. It means God grew angry with Moses. right? So basically, it's like his nose flared up. That's the Hebrew expression. That basically he was enraged with Moses. Vayomer, and he said, Halo Aharon Achicha Levi, behold, Aaron, your brother, the Levite, of course he's from the tribe of Levi, Yadati, I know, Ki Daber Yidaberhu, that he in fact will be capable of speaking. V'gam hinehu yotze likratecha, and behold, he is already going out to meet you. V'ra'acha, and he will see you. V'samach b'libo, and he'll be happy in his heart. And that, of course, contains a lot of different thoughts within it. So let's take a look at the Rashi. So this is from the tractates of Achim in the Talmud, page 102, and it says Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha. So this authority, Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha Omer, says, Kol Charon af Torah, that in every case where there is enragement, right? So, in other words, I think he's talking specifically about where God is enraged. The Emar Bor Roshim, it leaves a mark. In other words, there's some indication in what happens as a consequence that represents and shows the level of anger that has taken place on a divine level. In other words, there's some terrible consequence that usually takes place. But in this case, lo ne'emar boroshim. But here, no consequence is really made, right? Velo matzinu sheba onesh al yedei oto, and we don't find that a punishment comes by means oto charon, through this anger. In other words, divine anger and what that means, and please understanding this as metaphoric, right? But the idea of the capability we have of displeasing our Creator, right? But in this particular case, God doesn't punish Moses. Amar lo Rabbi Yossi. But Rabbi Yossi answers Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha. He argues with him and he says, Af bazo ne'emar boroshim. And he says, no, 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 no. There's still a consequence of this. Okay? And the consequence is Halo Aharon Achicha Halevi. So he says, behold, Aaron, your brother. In other words, when God says to Moses, Aaron, your brother is going to do this, Sheyahatid Liyot Levi. In other words, that he would in the future be the official Levite, Velo Kohen, and not a Kohen. In other words, by saying Aaron Achicha Halevi means he would have been simply a member of the tribe of Levi and not be a Kohen. He would not have the position of the priesthood. V'hakahuna hayiti omer latzet mimcha. And I would, this is speaking in God, giving God the words, that in the future the priesthood would have come from you. In other words, there is something now that is taken away from Moses as a result of this divine displeasure. Me'ata lo yeh, but from now this will not be the case. Elahu yeh kohen, but rather Aaron will be the priest, va'ata Levi, and you will be the Levite. Shneimar, and it states there's support for this idea in the book of Chronicles, the first book of Chronicles, chapter 23. Who Moshe, it says there, who Moshe ish Elohim, the man of God, Banav Yikru'u al Shevet Levi. They will be attributed or called after the name of the tribe of Levi. So they're simply Levites, they're not Kohanim. Hinehu yotze likratcha, behold, he is coming out to greet you. Keshetelech lemitzrayim. So it's not that he's coming out. I mean, I think what Rashi is doing here is he's clarifying that it's not that Aaron is on his way, because it sounds like that. But it's saying that when you return to Egypt, when you go to Egypt, Aaron is going to meet you. He will see you and he'll be glad in his heart. Lo keshe ata savur, not as you think he would be. You think Aaron would be angry with you. Sheyeh makpid alecha, that he would have been angry to you. She'ata lo ole ligdula, that you are going up to, in other words, he'd be jealous of the greatness that you are about to achieve. So remember that Moses still is going to be the main person here in this process, and that Aaron will simply be his spokesman. But don't worry, he will not be angry. Aaron's not going to be angry with you, Moses. Umisham zaka Aharon, right? And because of this, because Aaron wasn't jealous of his brother, Aharon merited le'edi hachoshin, the jewels of the choshin, of the breastplate, hanatun al halev, which are placed on the heart. So again, interesting statement about human nature and the degree to which we should not be jealous of the success of others. And I I know it seems to me that success guarantees one thing, and that's jealousy, that somebody's going to be jealous of you if you're successful. So it's interesting that there is in this particular interpretation, that understanding of it. And with this, we will stop our lesson for today.